Up to this point, we've been looking at how to change existing elements using JavaScript, whether that's adding classes, removing classes, or changing style properties individually. And in this video, we're going to look at how to create elements from JavaScript in the first place. The first part of this, creating elements, is pretty straightforward. Let's take a look at JavaScript now here in CodePen. I've got nothing in the HTML at all. I'm going to make an element. Let's make an H1 element. So we need to create an element and assign it to a variable to start with. So let's make a new element. And the method for creating an element is document.createElement. In the parentheses, what kind of element do you want to create? And this is just the tags that you're used to using already in HTML. If I'm specifically going to make an H1 element, I just need in quotation marks H1. So that has made an H1 element. What can I do to actually, I don't know if this worked yet, right? Maybe I should try logging it to the console. And see what we get there. Open the console here. And look at that. It looks like an H1, an empty H1 element. It's a couple of H1 tags like we would normally expect to see in HTML, but there's just nothing in them. How do you put some text inside of an element? You change its inner text property. So let's now add new element dot inner text, and we'll just make it say hello. Clear the console here. Let me rerun this so it reruns the code. Oh, I gotta save it. Refresh so it reruns the code here. Now we'll see H1 tags with the string hello inside. So the exact way that's written here is what we'd normally expect to see up here in HTML. So how do I make it actually display in the page? That's the next step here, is appending elements. I'm going to append this new H1 element to something that's either already in the HTML or maybe something that I've made along the way. Let's start with just creating a something like a main tag here. And I'll give this an ID of, oh gosh, I don't know, main container, how about? That's pretty boring. All right, so down here in the JavaScript, let me get rid of my console log. If I set a variable to my main container, now I can append, and append child is, you have to think about from the readings, the structure of, actually let's maybe review that really quick here. One of the recent readings was about the structure of the DOM. And if you look at this graph, or this sort of diagram here, it talks about how different elements have relationships to each other as parents and children. So a div that's a flexbox, for example, was going to contain multiple items. Each of those items is a child of that div. If you have a H1 tag, it's a child inside the body. If you have a P tag, it's a child inside the body. If you put a P tag in a div, then that P tag is a child of the div. So we're going to append child so that it puts the H1 inside of this main element. Main container dot append child. So append child is the method. And what's the element, the H1 that we made? That's that new element. So now I should actually see, whoops, spelled container wrong. Now I should actually see the hello H1 appear in the HTML. Once you're generating elements on the fly like this inside of JavaScript, it can be really useful to define some of the classes, some of the style properties that you would like those elements to have ahead of time in CSS, and then you can always add that class to the element. So let's say we're going to have a red header class. All I'm going to do here is say that the color is going to be red, which I'll define with hex code. And I want to have this class as an attribute on the H1 element. Down here, remember, what is the H1 element? It's that variable that I made called new element. So adding a class to new element is new element. We've done this a little bit already with toggle especially. You might have already used add and remove as well, depending upon the way you've approached your projects. New element.classList.add. So I've predefined a class called redHeader. And if I were generating lots of elements this way, that would be a really quick way to style them all. Instead of saying set property color red for each one, I can just predefine a class and put more than just color in here. I could also add a background color. I mean, you know, I could essentially address any property in here. Ooh, that's a really terrible color. I could change the font size, make it even larger than it already is. Here we go. So each of these things in here, each of the individual properties that I've referenced, instead of setting them individually when I make an element in JavaScript, when I create a new element in JavaScript, it's much faster, much more convenient to sort of predefine that class, what I want it to look like, and then add the class here once I've created the element.